There are cases that make headlines, and then there are cases that haunt the internet. Hey guys, welcome to the Notorious.tv, your home for stories that are scandalous, eccentric, and over the top. Today we step into the Mackenzie Shirilla case. It's a tragedy drowned in grief, fueled by outrage, and shaped by a narrative that hardened before the facts could even surface. Let's talk about it. This video is for educational purposes only. 4 years after this tragic incident, Netflix's documentary The Crash is giving new life to the Mackenzie Shirilla case. To summarize, back in 2022, Mackenzie Shirilla ran her car into a brick wall going about 90 miles per hour, resulting in her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and their friend, Davion Flanagan, losing their lives. Mackenzie was the lone survivor of the crash and was later convicted of murder. She is now serving a 15 years to life prison sentence as we speak. So with the release of this documentary, suddenly the entire internet became forensic experts, psychologists, and moral judges. Meanwhile, I'm over here like, I don't know, guys, like I'm just not convinced that this was the intentional schmurder plot that the prosecution and the documentary want you to believe. I have some pretty unpopular opinions about this case that I'm going to share today, and why I don't think the evidence proves intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Before we even get into the evidence, we have to talk about the character assassination that is the crux of this entire case. First of all, let's be honest. People hate Mackenzie because she's annoying. That's it. That's the whole thing. And the internet decided that that makes her a killer. But here's the thing. Being an entitled little gremlin is not a felony. Making most people cringe is not a felony. Looking like Mr. Bean is not a felony. And not performing grief the way that strangers want you to is also not a felony. Since The Crash came out, there are a whole lot of armchair psychologists diagnosing Mackenzie as a narcissist and a sociopath and pretty much everything in the DSM-5. But to me, these diagnoses only point to the unlikelihood that she planned some Romeo and Juliet ending for herself and Dominic Russo with Davion just collateral damage in the backseat. I mean, clearly she loved herself way too much to crash herself into a brick building. I just don't see it, guys. I just don't. I do not see a motive here at all. Mackenzie Shirilla was out here posting selfies, manifesting modeling contracts. She bought potatoes for dinner that night, okay? This is not the profile of someone planning a murder-suicide. This is the profile of someone planning brunch. And I know people want to point to the toxic relationship that Mackenzie and Dominic had and the recordings of Mackenzie threatening to key Dom's car and slash his tires.
You're going to come open this door right now or there's going to be a serious problem.
I can't, no. You can't keep making all these threats. Like, I can't open the door.
I'm going to break into your house.
Dude, what the actual... Okay.
Now open the door. Yeah, I will break. I will break. Do I have to like call the police?
Why? Why would you call the
Do I
police?
have to call the police or you're not going to let me into my house?
This is not your house.
That's just another girl acting out the Carrie Underwood song. You know the one. This is not evidence of premeditated murder whatsoever. I've known girls who not only fantasized about it, but actually did take a Louisville Slugger to both headlights and slash a hole in all 4 tires. And it was never a precursor to murder. A lot of people at some point in their lives find themselves in toxic relationships and they say or do things like this in the heat of the moment, especially when they're young. There are also reports that Mackenzie threatened to take her own life more than once, but I think we can conclude from this girl's entire essence that that was probably just an attention-seeking tactic, more so than her actually wanting to end it all. Honestly, I think if Mackenzie really had those types of tendencies, that her conviction would have been enough to send her over the edge by now. And people want to say that, oh, she went to a Halloween party after the crash. Can you believe the audacity of her to go to a concert? Okay, and what was she supposed to do? Walk around sobbing in a Victorian nightgown for the rest of her life? Mackenzie Shirilla's mom, she gets a lot of hate for when she addressed to the judge, but She sat there and watched this character assassination unfold against her daughter in this very public case. So I think any mother would want to approach the bench and defend their child.
Okay? She was laying in bed for 3 months crying. There was a shrine of him next to her, crying for 3 months. So her friends asked if she wanted to go out trick-or-treating or Halloween, and it was at OU. And she didn't even want to go. She said, I don't know, should I go? She couldn't even walk yet, barely. So I told her, I said, baby, please go. It's Halloween. You've been laying for 3 months crying, only listening to his music. Please go have just a moment of fun. A moment of fun. So we told her to go. My husband drove her. I brought her back home. She just needed a second of fun from losing her whole world.
If Mackenzie truly didn't remember the crash and truly didn't intend it, then why would she walk around performing guilt that she does not feel? If this crash really wasn't intentional, and I'm personally not convinced it was, why would she admit remorse about that to the court, the public, the internet, or anyone else? I'm just saying, there are plenty of examples of when the justice system has wrongfully convicted someone, and this could very well be one of them. I think it's worth mentioning that whenever people are acquitted, there seems to be a theme where those close to the case will comment about how, oh, this person always maintained their innocence the whole time they were in prison. Honestly, I'm sure Mackenzie does feel like total shit inside over this. She lost her first love. Her life is ruined. Almost everyone on planet Earth hates her. The no remorse argument gets old to me because the internet only sees little clips of her. We don't know what she feels when she's alone in her prison cell. We can't be in her head 24/7, just like none of us were in her head at the time of the crash. And if you're someone who keeps an open mind, go watch the videos that the Crime Circus YouTube channel has made over this case, because it points out a lot of compelling evidence that doesn't seem to be floating around in the mainstream. Mackenzie Shirilla's dad recently did an interview where he talks about how the Crime Circus channel actually dug up some evidence, video evidence, that he had not seen.
One of his posts showed up with us. Someone sent it to us, and he had found 5 or 6 videos, interviews from the Strongsville Police Department that were not in the discovery, or were not in the discovery that we could find. And we went over everything, and we had access to everything during the bind-over and the trial. These 5 videos weren't in the discovery, and in all the videos, everyone that's in there says that Mackenzie has a problem passing out or seizes. There was an issue, and they just blew over it. And at some point, during Christine Russo's or the brother's interview, because Christine and the brother were there, and every time the detective asks the brother something, he starts to answer, which seems to be truthful. And then Christine Russo talks over him and answers it for him. And he goes, oh, yeah. So at some point, Christine Russo says, these aren't going to be, no one's going to see these, right? And the detective goes, no, I'm not putting them in.
Wow.
So again, that's omittance.
I mean, don't you think those details are pretty damning for the prosecution? It really seems a little tunnel vision-y. Also, Dom's sister said that the makers of the crash let her review the documentary before it was released, and that they took her direction to remove some of the parts about Dom that she did not find favorable.
I got to preview it. The producers flew in from the UK in January, and I previewed it then, helped make some edits. They took out some things that were not nice things that were said about my brother from certain people in the cast.
So that proves that this film is biased, and Mackenzie's father, Steve Shirilla, confirmed that Netflix did not give their family the same opportunity to go through and cherry pick the parts that made them look bad. I mean, it's like Mackenzie's parents get criticized for letting her smoke green, for example. First of all, there are a lot of parents out there that see their teenagers using cannabis as pretty benign. Actually, it's probably a lot more normal than most people think, especially this day and age where there's so much less stigma surrounding the plant.
Here's where I think I disagree with everybody, because I know people are saying, oh my God, the parents, can you believe the parents? I don't think the parents are bad at all. And I'll tell you why. For 2 reasons. One is, the dad's getting dragged because he said, yeah, my daughter smokes marijuana. What am I going to do? The reality is that's true. And that she is 17 years old, and that you cannot control a 17-year-old and stop them from using marijuana. And the dad said, look, I used it when I was a kid. I can't stop them. And, honestly, in many cases, marijuana is a win if they're not drinking. So, yeah, kids smoke marijuana. So the fact that the dad was open about it and was real about it.
I'm with you on that. I don't fault that at all.
Like, do you think that Dom's mom, who lived next door to him, was completely clueless about the fact that he was the neighborhood plug and he was supplying Mackenzie and her high school friends with drugs? I mean, she wasn't born yesterday. She knew exactly what was going on. And of course, that doesn't mean that he deserved what happened to him. You know, I'm not trying to be insensitive at all to the victims, because this case really breaks my heart. And these two young men just had their whole lives ahead of them. And it's just absolutely devastating what happened to Dom and Davion. But I just think it's definitely one-sided, where people will just pick the Shirillas apart, but it's like nobody's allowed to even mention a word about anything that Dom may have done in the relationship that was toxic, how he contributed to the dynamic, or, you know, that they were all using substances together. And a lot of people will say that Mackenzie's motive to commit this crime was that Dom was planning to break up with her, but the evidence shows that these two were threatening to break up with each other all the time. It was a very normal thing. So I just really don't think there should be a lot of weight put on that, because they were constantly threatening to break up with each other. And there's also another video that the Crime Circus put out that shows that Dom was apologizing to Mackenzie after he jerked her steering wheel. There's a big debate about this. There's conflicting versions of events where Dominic had said that Mackenzie was driving erratically and his mom sent her friend or their friend to pick him up.
And Hench, I think it's Hench, because he gets things done, Christopher Martin, the felon that lives in Christine Russo's basement. And he's the one that gave the information or the intent to Mackenzie in her trial. He's the one that stated something that didn't happen, and we've got proof that Mackenzie did not threaten that crash that car that day.
So in case you're not following, Mackenzie and Dom got into an argument one day while she was driving down the highway. The situation escalated to where Dom's mom sent their friend Hench to pick up Dominic. And Hench was an eyewitness that said that Mackenzie was saying like she would crash the car, and that was a major piece of evidence in the trial to show intent on her part. But there were text messages that Mackenzie had sent to Dom after the incident, and apparently, according to her, he actually had reached over and grabbed her steering wheel and jerked it. And so she wrote to him, "The fact that my boyfriend of 4 years just tried to end my life by steering me off the highway, that's how I know you're not in love, and you never were. Somebody who loves me would never do this to me." And then she continued on, "I'm already nervous driving in the rain as it is, and the fact that you would even try to steer me off the road and make my car spin out, I absolutely cannot believe that you just tried to end my life." But there are text messages from Dom apologizing to Mackenzie after that event. Check it out.
Yeah. Number 1. Mackenzie never threatened to crash the car, and there are no text messages and no recordings, and not a single one of their friends have made the claim. That's called no evidence at all, ladies and gentlemen. The simple fact is, she never threatened to do it.
No.
In fact, there was actually an incident 2 weeks prior where her boyfriend allegedly apologized for allegedly attempting to crash the car by grabbing the wheel.
What?
What? Don't take my word for it. Let's check out these text messages. Approximately 2 weeks prior to this accident, Mackenzie had a little text message conversation with her boyfriend's mother. And she said, "Can you come get Dom? He just grabbed my steering wheel on the highway trying to spin out my car and hurt me. I'm scared to drive because it's raining, so I just need him to get picked up. If he doesn't get out of my car, I'm calling my dad, so please tell him to get out." Her boyfriend's mom says, "Hench is on the way, calm down for now, please." Mackenzie says, "To be honest, I can't calm down when he just tried to end my life. Then he lied to you about it." Boyfriend's mom says, "I'm just trying to defuse for now. I'm not mad at anyone." So her boyfriend's mom calls her a liar, and then Mackenzie says, "First of all, I'm not lying about anything. Maybe you shouldn't take his words so seriously. You don't know how he treats me behind closed doors. It's never okay to try to end somebody's life or put their hands on people." And then here's a text message conversation Mackenzie had with her boyfriend shortly after the incident on the highway. Her boyfriend says, "I'm sorry." And Mackenzie says, "That is not enough to fix this time." And he says, "Well, I am sorry. I just wanted to say sorry, that's it." Mackenzie says, "Oh, so you wanted to say sorry, but you didn't want to fix any of the massive problem you created? Cool." He says, "Yeah. It's not like anything's broken. There's no fixing." She says, "If that's how you feel, then we are done." Mackenzie says, "How can I believe that you're never going to do that again?" "I can't because I don't know your limit. Somebody who loves me would never do that. Never. I couldn't even do it if you told me to, but I guess that's different for you." And then her boyfriend says, "Yeah, I wasn't trying to do anything. I was trying to pass myself away first, ? I would have died first, LOL. Like, if you don't believe me, then yeah, just break up with me. If you can't believe me, there's no point anyway." And then Mackenzie says, "I mean, the fact that you're not saying anything to make me believe you shows that you would do it again. And so you're saying to pass yourself away, you would end me too? Why can you not fix problems for the effing death of you? Like, it's almost like you have fun doing it." Then her boyfriend says, "No, I was just saying if I was trying to kill anyone in that situation, I'd die too, and probably first." And then Mackenzie says, "So you would delete yourself first, so I die second? Why are you ignoring everything else I say?" So what's your take on those text messages? When I read through those, I see a frightened teenage girl. Somebody who was scared of what just happened.
My read on this situation hinges on the fact that Dom did not deny Mackenzie's accusations, but rather apologized. If he was not the aggressor that day, he would have defended himself in this text thread, but he didn't. And to me, that says everything that we need to know. And now we need to talk about Mackenzie's defense team. Let's talk about that disaster, because this girl was facing life in prison and her attorney walked into court like he was defending a traffic violation. And honestly, at a certain point, it stops being a weak representation and starts looking like straight up dereliction of duty. They could have done so much more to help her. They had the opportunity to call medical experts to discuss the possibility of a pre-existing medical condition contributing to the crash, and they should have definitely brought in their own expert to challenge the state's crash forensics, which I'll talk more about later. Also, Mackenzie's lawyer convinced her to go with a bench trial. A bench trial, meaning the judge was the entire jury. I think choosing a bench trial in this case was like playing Russian roulette with 5 bullets instead of 1. And this judge really clearly loved the spotlight. During the verdict and sentencing, she gave a whole dramatic monologue like she was auditioning for Law and Order Cleveland unit, just saying. Mackenzie got 2 concurrent life sentences with the possibility of parole after 15 years, but the judge literally said that she was only giving her parole eligibility because she felt quite certain that Mackenzie would spend more than 15 years in prison.
The difficulty for sentencing today, honestly, is whether or not I believe you should get consecutive sentences. I'm troubled that should I give you a concurrent sentence, that people will believe that somehow I'm being disrespectful to one of the victims. And on the other hand, I have to weigh the punishment. There's a very good likelihood, Mackenzie, that you will spend the rest of your life in prison. That won't be up to me. That will be up to the parole board, and that will be up to you to a great extent. I understand that the pain in this room wants me to impose the harshest sentence, but I don't believe that would be the appropriate sentence, because I do believe that Mackenzie will not be out in 15 years.
I'm sorry, what? That's not legal reasoning. For a judge to say, hey, I'm only giving you this because I know you'll serve longer. It's basically admitting that she's using the system to engineer an outcome that she emotionally wants, and that is not justice. That's ego with a gavel. And if this judge was so sure that Mackenzie intentionally unalived 2 people, why not stack the sentences? Why not remove parole eligibility? Why not give the maximum? Because deep down, she knew the case was not airtight. The leniency that she showed is evidence of doubt. A judge in a bench trial, especially in a high-profile case like this, gets to be the star of the show, and Judge Russo absolutely performed. But don't worry, the defense was not the only group fumbling the bag. The assistant prosecutor who was interviewed in The Crash on Netflix is giving major FBI reject energy. This is the kind of guy who once confiscated a vape pen and has been chasing that high ever since. You know what I mean? And now he's here, chest puffed out, acting like he just cracked the Zodiac. Cops and DAs love a narrative, they love a villain, and most of all, they love a conviction. They are storytellers with badges. So basically what happened in this case is that the police started interviewing Dom's family and friends, who all insisted that Mackenzie was a controlling, crazy little wench. And from there, it seems the investigators really caught a good old-fashioned case of tunnel vision. And once they decide you're the villain, they're going to try to bend every piece of evidence to fit that story, because the true evidence in this case is actually really weak, in my opinion. And this brings us to the crown jewel of the prosecution's case, the black box, the holy relic that everyone on TikTok thinks makes them a certified crash reconstructionist. People talk about this thing like it's a GoPro strapped to Mackenzie's forehead. It's not. It's a glorified USB stick that wakes up for 5 seconds, panics, and then dies. And even the state's own forensic expert could not speak on this evidence with absolute certainty.
Legal aspects of this police report are about the actual car data. Was this an accident or was it not, right? So you go to the report, it says, quote, Ohio State Highway Patrol Sergeant Ryan Fox emailed me his analysis of the EDR data. Prior to the Camry entering the intersection, a loud screeching sound can be heard from the business surveillance system camera that records the approach and crash of the Camry. This loud screeching is likely the result of a steering input of the driver and the inability of the tires and friction of the roadway to overcome the forward momentum of the vehicle. The vehicle's tires are likely turned as requested by the steering input reported, but the vehicle is continuing more in its original forward trajectory. This likely indicates manipulation of the steering wheel immediately prior to entering the intersection. The brake light that was illuminated mere fractions of a second prior to impact. The system will activate the rear brake lights to indicate the possible slowing of the vehicle to other motorists, even if the driver is not pressing on the brake pedal. The extreme driver input for the vehicle prior to the collision, the brake light activation, is likely the result of the safety systems working to avoid the impact ahead or return the vehicle to a straight orientation for the direction of travel. This likely indicates that although the steering wheel was manipulated left and right, no braking was applied by the operator.
So he said things like the brake light activation was likely the safety system. This behavior is likely consistent with, which, by the way, that's forensic science code for this is my best guess, but I can't actually prove it. And you don't convict a teenager of murder based on a guess. When the investigators pulled the event data recorder, the car's so-called black box, they got numbers, not answers. And that distinction matters because an EDR doesn't tell you why a car behaved the way it did. It only captures a tiny snapshot about 5 seconds before impact, and even then it records symptoms, not causes. So when the prosecution says that the vehicle was functioning normally, the EDR can't actually prove that. It can't confirm whether the throttle stuck, it can't confirm whether the brakes failed, it can't confirm whether the electronic throttle control glitched, whether a pedal sensor misfired, or whether the car's computer had a momentary freak out. And in a case where intent is everything, that gap matters because the EDR can show high throttle, no braking, and rising speed, but it cannot tell you whether that was deliberate, accidental, or mechanical. So when you're asked to believe that the car was perfectly healthy in those final seconds, remember, the EDR doesn't confirm that. It can't. It was never designed to. And that's where the reasonable doubt begins. The official story is that everything in the car was working perfectly at the time of the crash, which is adorable because the car was not intact. It looked like it had been compacted by a junkyard crusher. When a vehicle hits a building at nearly 100 miles per hour, you don't get a pristine museum quality exhibit to analyze. You get twisted metal, shattered components, and electronics that look like they went through a blender. So when the state says we found no evidence of mechanical malfunction, what they really mean is we found no evidence because the evidence was obliterated. You cannot rule out mechanical failure when the crash itself eliminated the very evidence that you would need to confirm it. That's not science, that is wishful thinking. And again, the burden of proof is on the state. If they cannot prove that the car was functioning normally, then they can't prove the driver acted intentionally. And I want to bring it back to the morning of July 31st, 2022, because I didn't realize until I was doing research for this video that the airbags actually deployed prior to the crash.
She didn't hit her brakes. Well, she didn't hit her brakes for 4.74 seconds of that ride. That's the only information they have. 4 points. That's when the black box turned on, about 5 or 6 seconds before she crossed Omitted Road and before it went into the building. Something happened in that car that caused that black box to turn on, which was, I think the car, from our car expert that we talked to, said that the car thought it was flipping over. So the black box turned on and started recording the car information in a non-linear sort of way. And that's important, that non-linear sort of way. And it deployed both side airbags. And I'm sorry, side airbags don't just go pillow fight. You know, it's not a soft explosion. It's a boom. And then there's powder all over there's powder floating in the car, in the cabin of the car.
Are you saying the airbags deployed before the accident?
Both side airbags deployed prior to her car crossing the street to hit the sign to get veered into the building.
That seems like a pretty big piece of information that we didn't get.
Yeah, I wonder why the prosecution didn't want to use it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they had it. They got the black box information. The black box is a nonlinear function. It's like an airplane black box, but it doesn't record sound and what's going on in the cabin. It records mechanical aspects of the car, braking, accelerating, blah blah, that kind of stuff. So the only actual evidence, hard, knock on wood, evidence is from 4.74 seconds of that black box. Yeah. That's not talking what happened prior.
Yeah.
All the way to when she turned. That's another what?
So everything we saw in that video of her speeding at the
that last moment.
Yeah.
That's after the black box turned on.
And after the airbags deployed.
Mm-hmm.
So it could just be 3 kids in the car freaking out because
Sasquatch could have popped in the car. Anything.
I mean, it would be hard to drive.
Yeah, well, the car expert said, he said nobody anybody in that car would be disoriented because of the 2 explosions and the powder floating around. You wouldn't be able to see.
Okay, so here's an alternative theory, okay? Something happened, maybe Mackenzie passed out and her leg muscles stiffened, which that can happen whenever you faint. And so maybe a stiff leg kept her foot on the gas pedal, and Dom reacted because he could see that she had been blacking out, and we know that there's testimony from people in Mackenzie's life that Mackenzie had been having these episodes of blacking out. So maybe Dom realized that this happened and he grabbed the steering wheel to keep the car on the road, and that's why it never really veered off the path. But then we know that something told the car to deploy the side airbags. So possibly a jerk of the wheel, or maybe the car was about to flip. I know I've lost control of a car before. It was the scariest experience of my whole entire life. So both side airbags in this Toyota Camry deployed as the car approached this intersection before it even hit anything. And these are the final moments that were captured on the black box, okay? And they were taken after the explosion of both side airbags. This is not talked about enough. An airbag deploying, let alone 2, would send powder everywhere. The sound on top of that would disorient everyone in the car. So when we hear theories about the gear shifter being switched into neutral and then back to drive, that sounds like a byproduct of the total chaos taking place inside that vehicle at the time. It doesn't sound like deliberate acts of back and forth by Mackenzie and Dom, like, I'm gonna put it in neutral to try to save us, and Mackenzie's like, oh no you don't, and slams it back into drive. That just doesn't sound likely to me in this environment where 2 explosions just went off and sent powder through the whole car. And speaking of cars not behaving normally, let's talk about the giant dusty elephant in the garage. Because if you remember the early 2010s, you know that Toyota had its own little era of, oops, our cars are possessed, aka the unintended acceleration era. And if you remember this story, then you would recall that Toyota wasn't dealing with one simple defect. They were dealing with a category of failures. That included floor mat interference. Some cases involved mechanical causes, and some were never fully explained. So this situation got big enough that Congress stepped in, and Toyota paid over $1 billion in fines and settlements. Modern systems can fail intermittently, and these situations are not limited to the 2010s. Look at this story from 2024.
Vehicle hurtling down the highway at more than 100 miles an hour, and despite their best efforts, the driver is powerless to stop it. I'm Tisha Powell.
And I'm Lee Zurich. It's rare, but it can happen. In 2024, video of this runaway car went viral, seen all over the country thanks to police dash cameras. Officers were on the phone with the driver trying to stop the car before this rural road in Minnesota came to a dead end.
E-brake doesn't do anything.
It's known as sudden unintended acceleration.
Could unintended acceleration have happened here? Rare, yes, but impossible, no. And in a criminal case, not possible matters because the prosecution has to eliminate reasonable alternatives, not just wave them away.
There are still Toyota owners with the new vehicles complaining about this issue, including the exact model she was driving. Don't just take my word for it. You can do your own research. There's people talking about this on the internet, on forums, and in comment sections, etc.
So let's talk about the medical angle, specifically POTS. I'll put what that stands for on the screen. It's a condition that Mackenzie was supposedly diagnosed with, according to her mother. And there are text messages between Mackenzie and Dominic discussing her blackouts.
So let me give you an example of what I mean. From Shirilla, July 2nd, 2022, so this is just weeks before the crash, quote, "The one I just had was probably the worst blackout-like pain level I've had. I'm scared it's just going to get worse." Now, Dom writes to Shirilla on July 2nd, 2022, "But you can take vitamins that will help blood flow." Also another message from Dom, "What I'm saying is your blood vessels aren't working right to get enough blood to your brain. That's why you black out." Also from Dom, "Main causes of blackouts is blood flow. Let's try getting you vitamins that support that." Shirilla responds at one point, "So are you saying I'm vitamin deficient or something I don't even know?" Dom replies, "No." Now here's the thing. These blackout conversations were actually happening well before the crash. I'm talking years before. Look at this from February 8th, 2020. Shirilla writes, "I had a really bad blackout today, FR." Dom writes, "How? What happened?" Shirilla, "IDEK, meaning I don't even know. I straight passed out."
People online love to clown this theory like it's some fun fact and not a literal explanation for what could have happened. But here's the reality. POTS can cause fainting, dizziness, sudden drops in blood pressure, blackouts, a loss of consciousness, tunnel vision, disorientation. And if she fainted behind the wheel, here's what would have happened, okay? She wouldn't brake. She wouldn't steer. Her foot could stay on the gas. She wouldn't remember the crash, and the black box would look exactly the same as intentional acceleration. People think that feigning equals going limp elegantly like a Victorian woman in a corset. Fainting often causes muscle rigidity, not relaxation. People fall like a board, not a puddle. So if her leg was extended on the gas pedal when she lost consciousness, it could absolutely stay there. And the prosecution and the defense didn't bring in a single medical expert to address this. Not one neurologist, not one cardiologist, nobody. They didn't disprove the fainting theory, they just ignored it.
Now, obviously the appeal now is not based on guilt or innocence, it's based on things that are procedural. Was there ineffective assistance of counsel? If POTS was in fact at play here, didn't her defense counsel have an obligation to put on a medical expert, to bring up records, maybe to speak with her treating physician who was treating her for the POTS These are all things that I think the parents would argue should have been done.
Do you think it was interesting they didn't call a medical expert?
I do, and I think it makes me think that at this point, sort of throw anything against the wall and see what sticks. It doesn't mean necessarily that POTS was not a factor here, but I do think it's curious that that was never presented as a defense strategy from the beginning.
More reasonable doubt. Mackenzie was prone to seizures, and a medical doctor, a special neurologist, filled out a report and signed paperwork in her appeal, testifying under oath. She believes that Mackenzie had a seizure just prior to this accident. Do you really think she'd risk her medical license for a random inmate that she's never met? No, nobody would do that. It's too risky. And very often, when people have seizures while they're driving, their foot locks up stiff as a board and floors the gas pedal. It's happened in other cases, and it's been caught on surveillance footage. It's a known problem. Also, her big oversized slipper, as seen in the crime scene photo, was clearly stuck to the pedal, with the pedal all the way down. And this is after hitting a brick wall at almost 100 miles per hour, and there's no human foot in it. Don't you think this 6-ounce slipper would have gone flying upon impact? You can clearly see it's lodged between the floor mat and the pedal, as the bodies inside the car went flying around. This is more reasonable doubt, and the poor girl was probably passed out and couldn't get the slipper off the pedal.
So we have a medical condition known to cause fainting, a crash pattern consistent with loss of consciousness, a driver who says she doesn't remember the event, and 0 experts on either side addressing it. That is not justice, that's negligence. And then, of course, we have the drugs. Because nothing says solid murder case like waving around a bag of shrooms that nobody took. People love to bring up the green and the shrooms like they're the smoking gun of this case. But first of all, okay, having weed in your car is not a murder motive. If it were, half of Gen Z would be on death row at this moment. Toxicology only found THC in Mackenzie's system, and this was days after the crash, okay? So we know that THC hangs around for a long time, so the only thing that anyone can say for sure is that she had used cannabis at some point. Not when, not how much, and not whether she was impaired, okay? But here's the part that the defense completely ignored. Cannabis-induced psychosis is a documented phenomenon. Rare? Yes, but real. And when it happens, it's not just someone got too high. It's full-blown paranoia, hallucinations, disorganized thinking. It's the kind of break from reality that can make a person panic, dissociate, or behave unpredictably and even violently. Most people who experience CIP have other risk factors like anxiety disorders or a trauma history, sleep deprivation, or mixing cannabis with stress or emotional volatility, which Mackenzie was said to have. So that's the exact kind of emotional cocktail that can trigger an acute episode. And if you think CIP is some fringe made-up defense, let's talk about the case of Bryn Spetcher out of California. Back in 2018, old Bryn took a bong rip with her boyfriend, and then she had what she claimed was a cannabis-induced psychotic break. She ended up stabbing her boyfriend 108 times. 108 times. Clearly, he didn't make it. And she also inflicted superficial stab wounds on herself. And tragically, she also fatally stabbed her dog. And the court accepted it. She walked away with what was essentially a slap on the wrist. She was convicted of involuntary manslaughter by an unlawful act. And she was sentenced to 2 years of probation and around 100 hours of community service. No prison time. I'm not saying Mackenzie had CIP. I'm just saying that this is an avenue that her defense could have explored. They never brought in a psychiatrist. They never brought in a toxicologist. I mean, this is just another theory, just like the state story is a theory. Because CIP is a medically documented explanation for erratic behavior. And I also want to talk about Mackenzie's friend Rosie, who was in the documentary. The assistant prosecutor commented how he would be really curious to see what she told the Netflix filmmakers because she refused to cooperate with the investigation at the time. Well, that, my friends, tells you something very specific about Rosie. She is smart, because in a case where you are helping your friends allegedly peddle drugs, possibly within the group, it's very likely that Tim Troop would have turned this into a drug investigation. And if he had had her in one of his interrogation rooms, then he could have very easily flipped the script and been like, so, Rosie, where did the drugs come from? So it was smart of her not to even risk that. I don't blame her for not wanting to talk to the cops. I mean, there's kind of a reason why a lot of people don't trust cops. Whenever I watch true crime and I see people talking to the cops, I'm always thinking, please shut the fuck up or get a lawyer. One thing I will say is that I wish Rosie had maybe gotten representation and spoke to investigators, or at least testified in the trial, because I honestly found her to be a very believable witness about how the night unfolded and what the vibes were.
I was like shocked. I genuinely do not think that this could have been on purpose, intentional, or planned. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. We were all friends.
I don't think that she has a reason to stand behind Mackenzie if she really believed that it was something sinister happening in the car. I want to make it clear that the public is not split about this case. Most people believe that she is guilty, but it's not because they understand the forensics, it's not because they read the crash data, and it's not because they sat through the trial. Because by the time this case hit the public, the verdict was already pretty much decided by vibes. And that's because you have a video that's really shocking to look at it. You would think that whatever was going on was intentional. The documentary it's emotional, and it's also biased. People hate Mackenzie's personality, and also people love certainty. They don't like nuance. They want to be able to pinpoint a cause and effect relationship, okay? And on top of all that, the internet just cannot resist a villain. People decided that Mackenzie is guilty basically because she's unlikable, not because the evidence proves intent. And that's the problem, that in this case, we've turned the justice system into a popularity contest. In America, defendants are supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and I just don't think that that's how this case was handled at all. So after looking at all this, the weak defense, the shaky forensics, the ignored medical factors, the emotional reactions, here's where I land. Okay, I am not saying that Mackenzie Shirilla is innocent. I'm saying that the evidence does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she intentionally unalived 2 people. This was not a trial. This was more like a group project graded by TikTok. And in a justice system that's supposed to require proof and not vibes, not personality, not pseudo-psychology, not, well, she seems annoying, so she probably did it, that should matter. You don't have to like her. You don't have to think that she's a good person. You don't even have to think that she's telling the truth. But you should demand evidence. And in this case, the evidence is a whole lot of likelies, maybes, possiblies, and we can't rule it out. That's not proof. That is guesswork. And honestly, that should terrify you more than this crash ever could. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the evidence proves intent, or do you think that this case is way more complicated than the internet wants it to be? I would really appreciate if you would like this video and share it, comment, subscribe, do all the things. It really helps my channel grow. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.